Hi, folks, it's Steve, and I am here with Jesse Berger. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my honor. Let's start our talk this way. Jesse, what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom for me means not being restricted, not being bound uh, to a preset disposition of how you're supposed to live your life. I grew up in Turkey. I was born and raised in Turkey. I moved to the States when I was 12, 13 years old. And I've got to see a lot of the world. I've got to see, friends and personal experiences and everything like that. I've really gotten to see how the rest of the world works. And this country is the only country where I think people actually can even understand truly what freedom is. I have friends that live in Colombia and I talk with them about different things going on and the idea of we get to do certain things here that like own guns, for example, is just so out of the blue for them. They can't comprehend it because they've never truly experienced it. So freedom to me means the ability for us to worship our God in the way that we see fit, which is not a pleasure that exists in a lot of other countries. It means having the ability to defend your family individually through the Second Amendment, which is something that does not exist in the vast majority of countries. And it means the ability to move economically between tiers. You don't have to be stuck as a poor person, as a homeless person, just because you were born into a homeless family. If you go to places like India, where their caste system is still very strongly enforced, you will not ever go beyond a certain level. Your life has a threshold to what it can accomplish. And we don't have those thresholds here in America. It's becoming more challenging, and we seem to be heading towards the direction of a lot of the European countries, a lot of these East Asian countries, but we're not there yet. We still do have freedom. We still do have a means for people to be able to get past those things and break into new territory, whether it's creating the airplane. That was America. To, I think it was what, 60, 70 years later, we were sending astronauts up onto the moon. I mean, these are just incredible things that can only exist in a country like America where we have freedom. And so that's what freedom means to me. It means having that ability to move left and right based on your own choices and your own decisions, whether it's towards prosperity or it's towards despair. It's your choice. And what you do with that choice will determine the direction that your life goes. So that's what freedom means to me.
That's a wonderful definition. Have you always felt like this? Have you always been somebody who placed such a premium on freedom?
That's a little bit more difficult for me to answer. Again, having grown up overseas, there was a lot of um, tyranny that I was exposed to, but in the back of my mind, there was always, oh yeah, but I'm an American citizen. And that was something that like I always kind of had, I always knew I was an American. I always knew I had an American passport. So even though I lived in Turkey, even though I lived in northern Iraq for a while with the Kurds, it was even as a young child, I always knew that there was a little bit of a difference there because I felt comfortable to be able to go and just try and do things because I'm like, well, I'm an American. What are you going to do to me? As a kid. Now, granted, that was a very immature and unwise view of freedom and what comes with that, but it is something that I was very much aware of. And in fact, I'm a military veteran. I spent just about 10 years in the military. I served in the Navy and in the Army. And that choice was actually to serve in the military service was actually generated from going with my father to one of his clinics. My father does prosthetics and orthotics. So he makes fake legs and arms and braces and stuff for people. And I remember going with him we were in a village called Dohuk in northern Iraq. It's borders Turkey, and it's filled with a bunch of Kurdish people, which Kurds are kind of looked down upon more than anyone else. I remember going to a clinic with him, and I saw kids that were my age, probably between 6 and 8 years old, with their legs blown off because Saddam Hussein was planting mines in the soccer fields that they would play in. And I remember as a kid thinking to myself, well, I can be like my dad, follow in his footsteps, try and be a physician, try and help these people that are hurting, or I can go take the guys out that are putting the mines there in the first place. And I liked the latter idea a little bit better. And it served me well as I got older, as I turned into a teenager, young adult. I had a lot of anger, a lot of aggression that was the appropriate place to point it. But I'm in a different stage of life now, so moving on. But anyways, I hope that kind of answered that question.
It does, and I can see that the military served you well in terms of giving you a proper channel for your aggression. Um, are you still working on that, or are you past that? Do you have a productive channel for your feistiness now, or you don't need one any longer?
I would say it's still a work in progress. But the example that I'll use is I used to train dogs. My family was in a very, very bad financial situation. We were eating ramen noodles every night. We had taken on a house that we couldn't afford. I had gotten medically retired right as soon as we had bought the house that we couldn't afford. And I found myself training dogs in order to try and make ends meet to put food on the table. And one of the stories that I wanted to share, I met this lady who had a Doberman Pinscher and then some type of mutt, right? Well, the Doberman was a great dog until she gave birth to their child. Once the baby came into the picture, if someone would walk across the street on the other side of the street of their house, that Doberman would lose its ever-loving mind. It was trying to kill anyone that came within, a mile of that little baby. And so she calls me up, hey, I need you to help me and get my dog to stop doing this. And as I started working with the dog, what I told her is I said, look, your dog's aggression, that response, that's a healthy response at the wrong time. We don't want to stop that response. We don't want to break your dog and turn it from being a protector into some passive animal that just lies there and does nothing while someone was to come and break into your house and try and kidnap your baby. We want the dog to go nuts. We just want them to know when it's the right time. That's a lesson that I was teaching to animals, but didn't realize how applicable it was to myself. And so now I've gotten to a point where I'm much more cognizant of that. I recognize that it's not my job to give everyone hugs and kisses and, oh, like, come here and let me just love on you. We are a body. Our society creates a body, and that body requires people to fulfill separate and distinct roles in unison with each other. So if you're someone that is maybe more generous, more gracious, more soft, more let's just say motherly, we'll just use broad examples. You're more motherly and you have that type of affection towards people, and you can give them a hug, you can put your arm around them and weep with them and grieve with them and all those other things. That's awesome. That's an extremely important role, and we need people that can do that. But at the same time, just because we lived in such a free and safe society due to World War II and all those guys, all those veterans that really preserve freedom, just because we have that environment does not mean that we negate the necessity for hard men, the necessity for that guy that will stand up and say, hey, you know what, this isn't your role anymore, you're out of your league going against this lion here, but I'm going to go take care of that situation. And don't tell me to go up to a lion and put my arm around it and give it hugs and kisses when the thing's trying to rip my face off. I'm going to go grab that thing by the neck. I'm going to wrangle it down, and I'm going to do what I need to do with it. It's either going to submit or it's going to go away. One of those two things will happen. And we need to have that combination in society. If we have too many people on the aggressive side, you end up becoming like the ancient Spartans, where the next thing you know, you're observing babies when they're born to see if they're puny or not, and you're discarding the ones that are undesirable. And if you're too far on the other side, you end up with a completely feminized society where you're just going to get taken over from the inside, because it doesn't take anything for someone that's more aggressive like myself to walk all over someone that's passive. And you won't like it. But I'll end up where I want to be, and you'll end up being at the bottom of the totem pole. So we've got to make sure that we're working together and understand that our strengths do not have to work against each other. They just have to be more clearly defined and separated. So the example that I used when I was chairman for my county, when some people told me I needed to tone down my language and I was being too aggressive, is I said, look, you're really good at giving the embrace, the warm embrace. I'm really good at making people have to make a choice. And I'm going to make a lot of people probably come running and crying right into your arms. So you be ready with your arms open to receive them. And the ones that are a danger, I'm going to make sure that they're pushed away. I'm going to make sure that they're handled properly. But that's my role. My role is to be that reckoning for a lot of people, and to be in their face, and to be the guy that, knife hands them in the military. It's like, you're either doing this or you're going to be miserable, and I'll be the one that makes you miserable. I don't particularly enjoy being in that role, but I've realized that that's the role that my natural skill sets and talents have provided me the opportunity to fulfill. And so for me, I'm in a stage personally where I'm trying to embrace that more. I'm trying to embrace it with more compassion. I'm trying to embrace it with more wisdom, because I'm only 34 years old, and I recognize that there's a lot that I need to learn. But also recognizing that, our country it's in the state it's in because this happened over a period of time. This wasn't something that happened overnight. And therefore, I have to look at my elders, and I have to be very critical in my thought process and say, I can acknowledge that your desires are correct. I can acknowledge that you have good intentions, but I also have to acknowledge that there were a lot of failures. And so when it came to politics, one of the first questions, because I'm dealing with people mostly in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and here I am, 34 years old. So what I did is I created a bit of a litmus test. And the first question I would ask is, tell me, what is your biggest failure and what you've done to overcome that? And in politics, it's, what's your biggest political failure? What was your biggest policy failure? Like, whatever it is, what's your biggest failure? And if you can't tell me that you've made any failures, if no, we've made all these good decisions, I'm like, okay, well, I can't really listen to you then, because you are too incapable of looking at yourself and saying, what am I doing wrong? You think that everything you're doing is right. And that's why we're in this position. So I feel oftentimes like I'm learning from the example, you can learn from bad leaders by what not to do. I feel like we're living in a perpetual situation where it's a lot of learning what not to do and very few examples of learning what to do. But anyways, that's enough of me rambling, I think, about that.
That was a great ramble. I hope you have another 3 days, because I think this might continue for 3 days. No. Um, there's a lot of what you said that I think is really valuable. One of which is there's a role for different kinds of people, because here you are, a veteran. You neutralize the bad guys. A lot of the people that are watching this right now are saying, "I'm not Jesse. I don't put down bad guys. But I still want to get involved." So what you're saying is encouraging, is that there's room for different types of people. Some people are going to be nurturers, and some people are going to be predators. Some people are going to be protectors. I get this. So I think that's a very, very encouraging message. With regards to what you said about bad leaders, and that we have a preponderance of bad leaders, because that's how we got into this mess. Um, do I take it then that one of your aspirations is to be a role model for a good leader?
Being that I'm 34 and I have a young family, I don't know that I want to be in public leadership like that. My stance is, I think, a little bit more simple, which is I want to serve wherever I can have the most impact. If that means being in a public role, then I'll do it. Maybe begrudgingly, but I'll do it. If it means being in the background and helping out with things from less of being in the middle of the fight, but more like the cloak and dagger type thing, being more the cloak side of it, that would be where I'd prefer to be. But at the end of the day, what I'm learning in my own personal life is the importance of submission, most importantly, to God's will. And so if God calls me to do something, if he makes that abundantly clear, then I'm at a stage right now where I'm going to say, okay. And sometimes, and this is the part that on a personal level, again, I'm really trying to understand, because we've created this whole culture where things are about your happiness, things are about making logical decisions, and oh well, we have to use our intellect to come up with a retirement plan, and with all these other, right? So everything's about planning things out. But then as I look through the Bible, I look at Abraham, right? And here he is, totally cozy, totally comfortable, living with his community, and God says, pick up and go that way. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? I have all my stuff here, but I think that God oftentimes will call us to do things, and the most important thing that we can do is obey. And so where I'm at is I'm trying to get closer to that relationship with God, to be able to know when I hear his voice, to be able to discern the difference between God's voice and the devil's, which is something I'd like to touch on just for a second, because I've noticed that this is a significant problem in America, because we have a bunch of different faiths. And then we have a core group of faiths that all adhere to or believe in the same fundamental principles, but the way that they're executed is vastly different. Mainly the Judeo-Christian faiths, right? So your Catholics, the Jewish faith, the Protestants. I say that very cautiously, but there is a level of commonality that is shared across some of these. And the problem that I've seen, especially in the Protestant churches, is their view on evil and their view on Satan. And they view him as this terrible, horrendous looking demonic creature. But what I've come to learn is from scripture, who is Satan? Well, originally Lucifer. Who was Lucifer? He was the most perfect being, the most powerful being created by God in heaven, right? So when I think of what is evil, I no longer look at that big, evil, mean, demonic looking thing. I'm looking at the girl with the red dress, the girl with the tight red dress that's whispering things that just sound so nice in your ear. Oh, just spend a little bit more time on Netflix. Like, you deserve the right to watch your Netflix show a little bit more. You don't need to put in any time towards this freedom that this country gives you. You don't need to. There's other people doing that. That's the voice of evil that I've been starting to articulate or identify more clearly. It's that voice that's like, oh no, violence is all bad. You need to just love people. Love is love. And the next thing you know, love is turning into pedophilia. It's turning into embracing of transgenderism, which is literally embracing of self-mutilating people, and trying to say that that's okay, instead of saying, wow, you have problems and I want to help you because you're a human being with intrinsic value, and I want to help you, not feed into your illness. What is your affirmity, right? I don't want to do that. I want to genuinely help. And so I would encourage everyone to start looking at things a little bit more discerningly. Identify the difference between what feels good and what is good, what feels right and what is right, because we live in a society so based on feelings. Well, if I feel like this is the right thing to do, then it must be right. It makes me happy, so it must be good. So far from the truth. And for those that are seeking the truth, I would just say, talk to your pastor, talk to your rabbi, talk to your priest, and they'll at least get you pointed in the right direction. It's still a personal journey. You're still going to have to put the work in, but there are ways that we can accomplish that in this country. And that goes back to the original question of, why is freedom so important? Because this is the only country left where we can do that. This is the only country left where we can pursue truth from different avenues of approach, and surprisingly find that it leads to a commonality, at least among certain faiths.
Bravo, you got my vote. Tell us more about being called. You're talking about the reluctant servant type idea, and not paying attention to the devil in the red dress. Um, and this may be a hard question to ask, but I would like you to share what you've come to understood so far. How do you know when you're being called by God to serve a higher cause, such as protecting freedom? How do you know? How can you tell it's God?
Sure. I think it involves a lot of discernment. I think that it involves being plugged in with the right community. I think that it's a double-edged sword because there's a lot of folks that will. I've met a lot of folks that will hyper-emphasize their fight on freedom to the detriment of their own families. An example I'll use is for the Republican Party. How many Republican elected officials have children that live in their household that are Democrats? If you were elected to be the standard bearer and your own children that live with you day in and day out are rejecting your beliefs, you might have put too much emphasis on the wrong thing. So I would say that it starts, for me personally, it starts with being in the Word. You have to be reading scripture. You have to understand the nature and the character of God. You can't assume that you know. You can't elevate yourself to the level of God by saying, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do. We have to first submit ourselves to the will of God. And we do that individually. That's something that's done in the privacy of your heart, and only you can know if you've actually done that or not. I would say the second thing is being involved with your community. Actually, you know what? Better answer, more articulate. I'm going to call it the 4 Bs. And I took this from a program called the Mighty Oaks program that I just came back from. But there's 4 Bs. Be in the Word, be in prayer, be in fellowship, and now I'm going to forget the last one. Be in contact. Be in contact. So being in the Word, that's the Bible. Whether it's the Torah, whether it's the New Testament, be in the Word as a starting point. Be in prayer constantly, asking God for wisdom, asking God to reveal himself to you. And I think that prayer might even be more important than being in the Word, just from the context of throughout human history. It's not like we've had access to the written word forever, but prayer was always there. And prayer was something that almost came before the Word to an extent. That's just how my brain rationalizes it. But those two are extremely important. Being in fellowship means plugging in with a community of people that are all pursuing that same belief. You cannot sit there and say, well, I don't agree with how this church teaches, so I'm not going to participate. You're never going to find a church that fully believes what you believe, because you're an individual. And if you are looking for a church that conforms to your ideology, I would venture to say that you might be elevating yourself to a level of God, to a level of saying, I know what's best, and therefore this is what it is. And if you do truly believe that, what my encouragement to you would be is go start your own church then and see how many people follow you. But if you're not willing to do that, then maybe swallow your pride, take that big humility pill and choke it down, and plug into a community of fellow believers that are all pursuing that same faith. And then the last one is be in contact. Be in contact, we define as being in contact with someone that is specifically there to hold you accountable. So if you're feeling called to go serve and run for, let's say, school board, right? You should have a group of people that you can go to and say, hey, Steve, I'm looking to run for school board. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a good idea? And you might say, Jesse, look, you're 34. You've got young kids. You've got some financial issues that you need to work on. You don't have the stability that you need. I don't think that this is wise for you to do. And that's now my corner man being in contact with me and saying, hey, look, I'm holding you accountable to this. So maybe what we do is we create a plan and we say, okay, you know what? That plan is going to be first achieving financial freedom, and then doing research on what's happening in the schools and coming up with a plan for how to implement it, and not just going in front of people and running your mouth, but saying, no, these are the specific policies. These are the specific regulations. This is how our money is being spent in our local school system. And these are the things that I want us to change because it will steer us towards whatever direction you're trying to go to. But those 4 B's, be in the word, be in prayer, be in fellowship, and be in contact. I think that if you do those things, God's going to make his will happen in your life, dare I say, whether you want it to or not.
History has a long string of reluctant prophets. Even Moses was like, no, get somebody else, please. I can't even open my. I get it. So exactly right. All right, let's finish up with this, Jesse. This is compelling. I know you're 34 years old. You're certainly wise ahead of your years. Tell me about your legacy. How do you want children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, the world to remember your name? What is it that you want them to remember about your life on this planet at this time?
I've thought about that a lot. Mostly because I've looked at how things are in America and how things are contrasted to how I grew up. Where I grew up in Turkey, we had the Church of Ephesus that was like a 30-minute drive, 45-minute drive from our house. We had all these historical sites that you read about in the Bible. And I was physically there and I saw them. And I saw structures that were thousands of years old, hundreds of years old. That was normal. Coming to America, where everything is always new. Everything is always new. Someone buys a new building in New York City, they don't renovate it and try and keep the history of it. No, they tear the thing down and build up a brand new one. And so what lasts? Those are things that I've thought about a lot. And as I look through history, as I read through, all the way back to the Greeks, the Romans, even all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, what has always lasted beyond everything else is faith. The Judeo-Christian God is the only one that has consistently lasted from the dawn of time till now. It's the only one. The Bible is the only book that is still being read across the world that was being read thousands of years ago. Whether you start with the Israelites and the Torah, or you go all the way into the New Testament and you talk about everything that the Catholic faith did, doesn't matter. There is something there that has allowed that to continue on. So what do I want my legacy to be? First and foremost, I want my kids and my wife and my community to say he loved his God and he followed him diligently. That's first and foremost. And everything for me stems from that. My ability to fight, for example, right now, how do I fight? Well, I created a company called Next Text. We send political text messages and we send text messages for churches and nonprofits, and we can do businesses as well. We serve enterprise level clients, but that's my way of fighting back. And it was something where we were getting hit with every single roadblock you can think of, literally every roadblock you can think of. I created another program for election integrity purposes, to be able to report things that are going on, which Annie Partridge from the Illinois Freedom Alliance, I know, referenced some of that program. But these are things that I did without any money coming in. Any rational person would have never spent the time on doing that, because they've been like, well, what's the benefit? How am I going to get paid for it? And there wasn't any pay that came from it. It's just something that I felt needed to happen. And the only reason I did those things is because I truly believe that God's calling me to use the skill sets and the talents that I've acquired to serve his higher purpose. And whether that means getting paid or it means something else, I don't know. I just know that if I'm obedient to his will, things will work out for the better in the long run. So I want my legacy to be that of someone that followed God, and because he followed God, fill in the blank. But that's what I think what I want on my tombstone. Loved God, loving husband, loving father. I think that's I'm kind of simple. I don't have huge aspirations. So
I love it. You are a proper vessel. Your goal is to become as perfect a vessel for God's will as you can be. And I frankly can't think of a higher purpose. Jesse, it has been an extreme honor to be able to hear your story. I want to thank you for sharing it. And I want to thank you for positioning yourself publicly to inspire what I'm sure will be so many people to do something for a higher cause, to bring God more into their life, to take a stand in whatever way they can, to feel encouraged because they realize there's a place for me and my unique skills. I think many people will replicate the path that you have chosen because it's a path that works and it can work for everybody. Thank you for gracing us with your truth.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate what you're doing. I think this is really important.
Thank you.